Okay, next we're going to talk about how we actually install a hard drive. There are many steps involved. The first thing we want to do is set the jumpers to let the system know whether this is going to be a master or a slave. Then we'll talk about physically installing the drive. We'll look at the components that are used, some considerations when installing a drive, and some precautions that we need to take when installing a drive. So let's look at the jumpers first. We set jumpers or dip switches, but most of the time with hard drives, it's jumpers, to let the system know whether we have a single drive configuration or whether we have multiple drives on the same cable and on the same channel. This is in an IDE, Integrated Drive Electronics setup. A single drive configuration does not require a jumper on most hard drives. It's just assumed that if there's no jumper, that's the single drive configuration. The master drive configuration, typically the jumper will be in the first position, in the far left. In a slave drive configuration, the jumper will be in the center. Once we set the jumpers, then we'll physically install the drive, the cable, and the power to the drive. The components that we use vary depending on whether we're installing an IDE drive or a SCSI drive. With IDE, we just have the drive, the 40-pin cable, and possibly a kit to make the drive fit into a larger bay. We use a kit if the drive is too small. If the drive is a little bit too large, then find a way to expand the bay, but don't use the hard drive to do it. In other words, don't ever torque the hard drive into a bay or press it in, because if we torque the case, we can damage the hard drive. And sometimes it doesn't happen immediately. Sometimes the drive just tears itself up over time because of an improper installation. So always make sure that a drive can slide into a bay without torquing the case. If we're doing a SCSI, a Small Computer Systems Interface installation, you remember that in SCSI, the components use a host adapter and possibly terminators. So these would be additional components that we would need to use. To focus back on IDE, which are going to be most of the drives that we would install, IDE hard drives support up to 4 IDE drives on the same system. We have 2 channels, the primary channel and the secondary channel, and these are labeled on our system board. The 4 possible setups are to put the drive on the primary channel and set it as a master, to put it on the primary and set it as a slave, to put it on the secondary and set it as a master, or to put it on the secondary and set it as a slave. Again, if there's only one drive in the entire system, then we don't need to set anything. We put it on the primary and leave the jumper off, and it would automatically be the master on the primary. It's a good practice to place the fastest devices on the primary channel and the slower devices on the secondary channel. So next we'll take a look at some other considerations and some precautions when we install a hard drive.